for compliance with competition laws. We will not talk about production prices or market procedures. And then we go to the next slide, where you see also that we also ask you to please turn off any video, audio, or transcriptions tool and disable any AI assistant from accessing this meeting. Cefic will share a summary after the webinar. The summary will be about the webinar and about all the questions and the answers you will raise during the webinar. We are recording the webinar for the preparation of this summary, and the recording will be then destroyed. For what logistics is concerned, as you can see on the screen here, everybody is on mute. There will be a question-answer session after each presentation, and you have, in the Teams, you have a question-answer box. You can tick and put there your questions in it, and we will use it to put the questions or to give the questions to the different speakers. Good. So now we can start. I will give the floor to William Garcia, Executive Director, HSE, Responsible Care and Supply Chain at Cefic, for a brief introduction. William, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jean, and good morning to you all. Thanks for making your time available this morning for this important topics of the directive implementation on network and information services. My name is William Garcia. I'm the head of the Program Council HSE in charge of security, amongst other things. To introduce that session and set the scene before giving the floor to our speakers today, the least we can say today is that networks and information systems have become integral parts of our daily lives. We depend on them, and many critical societal and economic activities are actually depend on those networks for their functioning. The effect is also in the last few years, we have seen a fast, to say the least, expansion of the digital landscape, owing to sequences on innovations. The global pandemic also exacerbated that. The cyber component of the war in Ukraine gave another layer of complexity, and many more actually factors that influence that fast, swift expansion of the digital landscape. But all of that leading to an increased number of cyber attacks targeting EU organizations and member states in many instances. So nowadays, what we can say is that cyber incidents is likely to cause serious operational disruptions of critical sectors across the society, and thus affect individuals and may cause substantial material, physical, and moral damage across the European society. Now, on the directive, since this is the heart of the conversation today, since its entry into force in 2016, the so-called NIS Directive #1 has enabled a significant change in mindset in the European regulatory approach to cybersecurity. Nevertheless, it faces challenges and loopholes, resulting in a fragmented approach across the European member states. And I think this webinar here today will outline some of those challenges going forward into the implementation of the version 2 of the NIS Directive that aims to get the European society and economy up to speed and establish a higher level of cybersecurity and the resilience within the organizations of the European Union at all levels. Member states are asked to transpose this directive into their national legislation by October 17 this year, which is quite like tomorrow. This directive, we know, brings into scope more sectors and focuses on providing enhanced guidelines to ensure this uniform transposition of the law across member states. And the webinar will tackle that implementation and guidance in more details. Organizations, and the chemical industry is no exception to that one, should start preparing themselves by defining their compliance roadmap and optimizing their cybersecurity awareness to bring that to the top of their organizations. The chemical industry falls under the NIS2 as important entities according to the new directive, but unless specified otherwise by national authorities. So things are always possible that in one or the other member states, the chemical industry players in this member state would actually be classified as at the higher level of scrutiny. So this webinar will take you through the nuances of the classification between essential and important entities and which actions must be taken to protect your assets and your operations. I truly hope you will find it useful. This one is the second edition of a webinar, like a follow-up of a webinar we held in December last year. We hope that you're going to have a very interactive session. So please do not hesitate to take the floor. I mean, virtual floor through the chat box. And we promise you, and that's a commitment, we will take each and every question that you may post on the chat box, either live today or as a follow-up, in the next few days. I wish you all a very, very fruitful session, and over to you, Jean, for the launch of this panel debate.
Thank you, William, for your introduction. I think it's good to show the importance of this directive and the complexity of the transposition and implementation in real time. We start now with the first part of our webinar, the information about the NIS2 Directive. And I give the floor to Ms. Kristova, team leader for the NIS Directive team in the unit dealing with cybersecurity and digital privacy policy at DG Connect, if I say it correct. So she will explain us more about the directive and the need of it. So, Ms. Kristova, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to explain what the NIS Directive is about and how it would impact the chemical sector, because it is a new sector indeed, so we need to bring more explanation than to older sectors, let's say, what William Garcia said, that were already in scope of the old directive. So I'm very happy to be here today. And go to the next slide, which starts my presentation with why we need to have cybersecurity in the first place, and probably I don't need to explain it because it's kind of obvious to everyone. We have had a big shift of this digitalization also due to the COVID pandemic. The type of attacks due to geopolitics have increased and have changed, and the number, the types, the impact of cyber attacks has increased, has changed a lot since the last years. So we don't have to even discuss why cybersecurity is necessary. This was not the case 10 years ago when the first NIS directive was negotiated. It took quite a while to convince all stakeholders why we need common cybersecurity rules across the EU. It was not taken for granted as it is now. So now NIS2, we managed to negotiate it much, much faster, and it was all about the details. It was not about why we need it. So if you go on the next slide, there is a very nice timeline which shows how cybersecurity policy and legislation in the EU developed over the past 8, but almost 10 years now. NIS1 is in force since 2016, but it had a very narrow scope, only 7 main, most critical sectors like energy, transport, health, and so on. And then the way it handled the requirements was not optimal, and we saw that with time this had to change. I have a slide which would explain more precisely why it was not okay. And then meanwhile, the legislators were required to start adding pieces of the puzzle to have a full cybersecurity policy landscape in place, which would be able to address all the missing elements. So NIS directive is about the operational resilience of companies in critical sectors, critical for the economy and society. But now there's, for example, the new Cyber Resilience Act, which is about to, it's almost finalized. It will enter into force hopefully by the end of this year, which you can see in it's 2022, which is, for example, providing what products have to enter the market. So only products which have cybersecurity in their design and development, and which would then by the manufacturer would be kept cyber secure over their lifetime, would be allowed on the European market. So we're tackling cybersecurity from different perspectives. And then NIS is accompanied by the Critical Entities Resilience Directive, which tackles the physical resilience of critical infrastructure in the Union. And it is also kind of complementary, the cyber and physical elements. So we have, as legislators, as policymakers, we are trying to address all the missing issues which are not there in the market, and indeed which not all companies take into account, because often cybersecurity is considered as something, you know, that's is not a necessity. So NIS is hopefully changing this. And if you go on the next slide, you can see the main challenges of NIS1. So I mentioned the sectors. First, there were only quite a few sectors, and the way they were defined, or the way that companies that would have to comply with the requirements of the directive and have to take cybersecurity measures, they were defined on a national level. So it was up to each member state to decide which type of entity, based on different criticality criteria, would be in scope. And from an internal market perspective, this was not okay. It led to just the opposite of harmonization. And this led also to different requirements, different notification timelines, and basically everything was different from one member state to another. And then adding also the need to increase the scope and to exchange more information. This all led to the necessity of revising the NIS directive. So this is what NIS2 is trying to fix. I hope we are successful. Let's see. And if you go on the next slide, you will see the main pillars of NIS2. So NIS2 indeed entered into force in January 2023. The EU member states have until 17th of October to transpose it into a national law. I would like to congratulate Belgium for being the first one to have done this. I have Carl sitting next to me. So they did a great job. And so what NIS2 is introducing is, it's actually building on the 3 building blocks of NIS1. What we have and what we already had under NIS1 were member states' capabilities. It means all member states had to have national competent authorities in place that would be competent for cybersecurity, national the cyber security incident response teams, so-called CSIRTs. national cybersecurity strategies. But NIS2 is now adding on this by introducing, for example, also crisis management frameworks in case of large-scale incidents and crises on a national level. And so all these different actors are also meeting together at the European level in the third column, cooperation and information exchange, at an EU level. So there is an active, constant exchange between member state authorities in the cooperation group, in the CSIRTS network, now in so-called Cyclone, it's the crisis management framework. And so there, what you see in bold are the new elements that NIS2 is bringing. What would be interesting for you now is the middle pillar. It is the risk management reporting. As I said, NIS1 had just very high level requirements, and it was up to each member state to define this. What NIS2 is adding is it's streamlining these requirements, which should be then which should be imposed on the entities. It's also expanding the scope, streamlining the requirements, excuse me, and also giving more stronger supervision tools to the national authorities, a toolbox which is much richer than before. One important element that is new and that is a big game changer, I would say, is that top management would be accountable for non-compliance with cybersecurity risk management measures, which means we're bringing cybersecurity to the boardroom. And this is definitely going to change, and we can already see it because, I mean, because of the larger scope and the different type of threshold that NIS is introducing, so the way it deals with defining the scope, which I will explain in a moment, but also because of this, we see everywhere across the EU in industries which never spoke about cybersecurity, in less mature member states, smaller member states, bigger member states which are less mature. Now everyone is interested in what are their obligations, what would be their obligations under NIS2. So everyone is talking about NIS2. So we're very glad about finally raising the awareness of cybersecurity across the whole EU. And if you go on the next slide, and the one after, we can see what entities would be in scope. So the first rule is that NIS, so the ground rule, we're talking about public-private entities. It's not only private companies that are listed in there are two annexes in the directive with detailed sectors that would be covered. However, this time it's not up to each member state solely to define the companies in scope, but there is a size cap or size threshold. It's as a rule, medium-sized companies or larger companies, so medium-sized or larger would qualify, that are active in the sectors listed in NIS2, they would be in scope. At the same time, due to national specificities, there is a flexibility. There is a possibility for member states to add other companies that are considered critical because they're the sole supplier, because they're critical for certain regional activity. So there are a number of other requirements which would allow to tackle national specificities. So there is a flexibility. Also, the critical entities resilience. I mentioned the physical resilience directive. The entities which would be identified under this directive, they would automatically be in scope. So everything that is considered critical by a member state, be it from a physical perspective, would automatically have to comply with NIS as well. And of course, there are certain exceptions for certain sectors, usually more digital sectors. And then on the next slide, you'll see what are the sectors we're talking about. These are the two annexes. And the sectors in black is what NIS1 used to cover, what I mentioned: energy, transport, banking, financial market infrastructures, health, drinking water, digital infrastructure, digital providers, so search engines, online marketplace, and cloud providers under NIS1 were covered, but with a very light regime. So both the requirements and the supervision enforcement was not easy on them. It was not easy to implement. So it did not work so well. So now the system is being revised, and all the colorful sectors, so the red and green, are what is new. And these have been added on the basis of a detailed impact assessment, public consultations, discussions with industry, with member states, on the basis of criteria such as digitalization, interconnectedness between the sectors, criticality, whether they were already in scope of NIS1, because there were certain sectors, including the chemical sector, which were already identified by NIS1. So in certain member states, the chemical sector was considered critical and it had to comply with cybersecurity requirements already until now. And so on the basis of these criteria, this list was defined. Of course, it also underwent the co-legislative process, and it actually even expanded it. So we were thinking in the beginning from the Commission perspective, it's already quite broad, but the negotiation process even added ICT service management, research. And so we have, as a rule, all medium-sized companies and larger from the sectors that you can see on this slide that would have to comply with the requirements of NIS. However, to ensure certain proportionality, you can move on the next slide. This is what William Garcia mentioned in the beginning. We have a differentiation. So not everyone is treated in exactly the same way, exactly because some of these entities and sectors are already used to having cybersecurity in place and others are new. That, and also because of the importance of certain, like the size again is considered a good proxy for criticality, that there is a distinction between essential entities and important entities. So the essential entities are the large entities from Annex 1. So the chemical industry is considered important per se. So all the smaller than basically medium size or smaller from the Annex 1 plus all the Annex 2 entities are important. And the main difference is in the supervision. So the important entities would be supervised only ex post. So they would have to comply with the requirements and report incidents, but they would not be in constant contact with the national authorities. The national authorities would be able to go and check on them if there is an incident, if there is evidence that something was not done correctly, then they can go and audit. Whereas for the essential, this would be a more constant, much closer contact with the authorities and more reporting and more audits, a more regular audit and so on. Also, the sanction regime is different. There is a possibility to impose fines, of course, as an ultima ratio, if no other mean is bringing any results. But for essential important entities, the fines would be lower. Another important element for the chemical industry is the jurisdiction, which would be based. There are three types of jurisdiction for NIS2 purposes. For the chemical industry, it would be based on where the entities are established. So the company has to look at the national transposition in the member state where they're established and comply with the national laws, which are transposing NIS, and report incidents in this member state. So if a company is established in several member states, a company from the sectors that NIS is covering, then there would be parallel jurisdictions and parallel compliance with several jurisdictions. So the next slide can show you what, you can go on one more. what are the requirements? I mentioned accountability for top management. The managers would not only be accountable, they'll have to be taught what cybersecurity is about. They have to be educated, which is also good. They have to know what they're signing off for. So there will be regular trainings of the management bodies, of managers, and also of the personnel. And generally, the measures that NIS2 is imposing are risk-based. So it would very much depend on the risks, on a risk analysis done by the company, the risk that it is facing, which is also linked to its size, to its systems. So it is first to be done at a level at the company. There's also the so-called all-hazard approach. So we're not only talking about the definition of a cybersecurity incident does not limit only to purely computer-based incidents, but the company has to protect its asset also from physical harm. So a server has to be protected also from flooding and from fire and so on. And NIS2 is setting a minimum set of measures. So these measures, if you can go on the next slide, these are the 10 measures that NIS is requiring. And these are generally measures which derive from international and European commonly accepted standards. So we have not reinvented anything. This is the, let's say, ABC of cybersecurity, such as risk analysis, incident handling, business continuity. Supply chain security is very much in the focus, because supply chain attacks have been one of the biggest issue lately. This is one of the reasons I mentioned in the beginning, the Cyber Resilience Act. The Cyber Resilience Act is going to exactly help companies deal with this. So the whole chain of all products with digital elements, hardware, software that companies are using, which would be placed on the European market, would have to already by design comply. So the compliance with NIS would be facilitated by when buying or supplying any products. And so on. I'm not going to go through all these requirements, but this is the set of requirements that each company will have to look at, and then again on a risk-based, it has to take the proportionate means to address and to comply with them. On the next slide, and basically the one after, is the second big element that companies have to do. Is, so on the one hand, they have to comply with cybersecurity risk management measures. On the other hand, they would have to report incidents, and reporting incidents is important for helping companies mitigate the incidents in the first place, for raising awareness, for building policy. So this is shared information which is necessary, and it is an commonly agreed necessity in the cybersecurity world. So what NIS2 now is bringing about are more streamlined requirements, more streamlined triggers and timelines for reporting. And companies have to report significant incidents. So not any incident, it has to have reached the threshold of significance. And the thresholds of significance are something that we have the empowerment to define with the European Commission in the course of comitology. For certain types of companies, we are doing it now. There is an implementing regulation that is being now designed to define what exactly do we consider significant, as of what stage of importance should a company notify. And the notification should be triggered by becoming aware of the significance of the incident. And then this multiple stage approach goes in 24 hours from becoming aware, an early warning, which is giving just the very general information. We have an issue, and these are the first information that we have at hand. And then with time, after 48 hours, this information should be then supplemented, and then within 1 month, a final report. And so you can go on my last slide on the transposition and implementation. What I mentioned, 17th of October is the deadline. Belgium is the champion. Other member states are getting there. Some member states already announced publicly that there would be delays because of often political reasons. This year was a year of many elections, so this has created certain certain hurdles on the way of legislators. And for the European Commission, our role in the implementation so far was, since the entry into force, we have provided certain guidance which was required by us by the directive, but also we have been working hand in hand with the competent authorities, with the member states, to provide guidance, interpretation of provisions of the directive. This has been discussed in the cooperation group with all member states and authorities on bilateral. So we have been trying to accompany member states to the extent possible along this way. As I mentioned, the implementing act, so one implementing act which had a deadline, also the 17th of October, which would be addressed at more digital cross-border providers like cloud data centers. It will specify what would be the requirement. So the measures that you saw, the 10 cybersecurity risk management measures would be further specified. And the threshold for a significant incident would also be defined more clearly for the companies which would be in scope to look at. These implementing acts have specific addressees, but at the same time, the cybersecurity risk management measures that it covers are quite horizontal. They are addressed to all types of entities that are in scope, and there are quite a few. And also there are certain horizontal thresholds for incident reporting. So these could serve for inspiration for companies when they prepare to apply national rules. But I will stop here and then happy to later answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Christova, for this insightful presentation about the NIS directive. It certainly clarifies a lot about the importance of the directive. We already know it, but I think it's good to clarify and to repeat it in our actual, but also certainly in the future network of connected world. And one sentence, certainly for the industry, was very important when you spoke about the risk-based approach. And I think that's very important in the implementation of the directive, is that risk-based approach we all know already in safety. So it's nothing new. So I open now the floor for some questions. So I have two questions in the question box. The first question's coming from Christian Bozanka. Size cap is one of the main criteria used to identify if a company needs to comply to NIS2. For global companies, do we need to consider size as of global entity or local ones? So, for example, I have a site in Italy, I have a site in Spain. Do I have to count everything together, or do we look separately?
Okay, so we have to look at the company as a whole, which is covered by this sector, whether it complies with the size cap. And then the establishments in each member state would define the jurisdiction under which the company would fall. So it could be that one large company, which would be in scope, would then have smaller subsidiaries in member states, and then it would have to comply with various legal regimes.
Good, thank you. And a second question is, would you have a recap table of where each member state is or are?
In terms of transposition?
Yeah.
Well, since the transposition deadline has not expired yet, and I guess many member states are in a hurry now to complete before the deadline, we are not commenting on this yet. but once 17th of October passes, then we'll be able to officially provide more information on that.
Okay, thank you. William?
Yeah, thank you very much, actually, for your presentation. My question relates to the reporting on incidents. Since the chemical industry is not only made of large accounts, but the vast majority of members are actually SMEs, either large or smaller ones. My question relates to the way to commensurate reporting to the magnitude of the problem being risk-based. If the way it had been engineered resembled a lot to what we see in the nuclear energy production as far as the incidents, tiers 1, tiers 2, etc., are concerned. So my question is, how would you make sure that the reporting burden is commensurate to the size of the companies in this regard, and maybe the reporting confined to the highly critical incidents, and how to classify criticality of those incidents? Thank you.
Thank you. So what I mentioned is now we spent the last year, and again, Carl was a part of these discussions, how to define what is a significant incident. Again, I mean, vis-a-vis cloud, data centers, and so on, this type of entities. But in this discussion, we had a general discussion that it's not easy to define when as an incident is considered significant and should be reported, because it's on the one side a burden on the entity, although by reporting it could request help from the CISR, so it could be kind of a mutual benefit. It could have, especially this is especially interesting for smaller companies, that they could require assistance from the national authorities. But it is also on the national authorities to make sure that all of a sudden they're not flooded by useless information. So it was a 1 year at least discussion, which follows on the previous 5 years of implementation of NIS1 and trying to learn from what we did not do right. And we're still, hesitant about whether we got it right. We'll see. I think time will show. But indeed, it's not easy. For example, we managed to come forward with were very specific, targeted, vertical types of thresholds. So per type of entity, because it's quite difficult to say across everyone this is the right threshold. They're also in this implementing act, there are also horizontal thresholds, like a certain financial damage. If a company expects that this incident is causing us significant financial damage, then it should report. We had quite some discussions about what reputational. So if it's broadly reported in certain media, should this also trigger an incident report? If it causes health damage, and so on. So there are certain triggers which should lead to an incident report. We have not finalized it, so this is soon. On the 2nd of October, we'll have the last comitology. This is when there is implementing legislation in the EU. There it is done with the help of a committee of experts, of national experts. So on the 2nd of October, there is and the next meeting, hopefully, where we would agree on the text. So it's not easy to define. Often it has to be very targeted to the type of entity, but if such guidance does not exist at European level, it will be also left for the national competent authorities, for the member states to provide more specific guidelines or guidance at a national level to companies, even in various sectors. If not, we have an empowerment which is general it would cover everything that is in scope of NIS to defines to adopt similar implementing legislation, which is. But we have to see whether there is a political and need from the industry to clarify. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I think to respect the hours, I still have some questions, but I will keep them for later or for after. So thank you for the very interesting presentation again, and for the answers to the questions. So I want now to introduce Mr. Karl Dobbelaar, the #1 of the class, like I heard more than once. I'm gonna repeat it to you, Karl. He is the advisor operators of Vital Interest Center for Cybersecurity in Belgium. So he will explain us how Belgium did this transposition of the directive in their national legislation. So, Karl, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the nice words, which go to the CCB team and in particular the legal department. So I don't take it personally. So the role or the idea of this presentation after the, let's say, general presentation from Boriana is to highlight some focuses that we put as a member state during the transposition. So there are quite some slides in the presentation. I will skip quite some of them because or it has been said or it is more generic and it can serve as a documentation. And then I indicate slide 31. I mentioned how during the presentation and on the slides you will see which specific transposition topics are highlighted on slide 31. So with the Belgian flag, when it is indicated on the slide, you can take it as a specific Belgian flavor. So if you're not a Belgian entity, it might mean that it is not directly applicable. So that's a bit of a warning. At the same time, it can help as an inspiration or as a tool to better understand the topic for the others as well. So the materials that we are developing, they are on our website. They are open for all member states, for all entities, but of course, in particular, we developed them for our Belgian audience. Then on slide 32, a short word on the agenda. I will come back on the scope. We have some visuals to help the exercise to determine whether I am essential, important, whether I am large or small, so that I will highlight. And then the obligations, we summarize them with those 4 that you see on the slide. And I conclude with a small word on how in Belgium, and that's a typical Belgian transposition decision, how we see the supervision. So I will skip the next slides and go to slide 35, which is just setting the scene with a brief summary of what is NIS2, what it is, why it has seen the world, and what it is, for who it is. So I think Boriana clearly explained the history and the reason why. So we can go to the next on 36, 37 on scope, where you will see like the same content as in the previous presentation. Maybe one message that might be important for this audience in chemical industry is that although the chemical industry is in Annex 2, so it is important, there is one side note with regard to SIR entities, so critical entity resilience entities. They are considered as essential entities. So take that into account. If you are a SIR entity, you will be considered as an essential, whatever the size and whatever the other rules say. So that's an important one. And then on the next slide, 38, it's just an extract from the Annex 2, where you have the brief description or the definition of the chemical industry, and I'm not an expert in chemistry or chemical industry, so I won't explain what all the terminology means. The message I want to give with this slide is to understand whether your activity qualifies as a NIS2 activity. You really have to go into the details of the legal text that are mentioned in the definition of that sector. So, for example, you will have to go into the REACH articles specifying what is the definition of a manufacturer, what is the definition of a distributor or a producer of an article. So it's this similar for other industries, for example, transport. It's one of the NIS sectors, but it doesn't mean that everyone running a lorry is in scope of the NIS directive. So it's only after going into the details that you will be able to establish that. So that is with regard to the first element of the scope, the activity. And then the second on slide 39 is about the size. So as discussed already, Annex 2 entities, they are considered important as soon as they are at least medium-sized. So which means that only the less than medium-sized would not be part of the scope. And for that, and you've on slide 40, and it's a visual you can also find on our website. It's a visual translation of the European Commission's user guides to SME definition. It's to explain what is an SME and the size. It takes quite some pages. But if you have to answer the question whether you qualify as a small entity, so that you would not be in scope, it's basically the bottom of this slide that tells you you have to have less than 50 employees, and you have to have less than 10 million of an annual balance or sheet total. So only in that case you are considered small. Only in that case, if you are in chemical industry, you won't be considered automatically in scope of the NIS legislation. So at the end of the presentation, one of the last slides, there are some URLs onto our website where you can find these materials for download, which for this one, for example, it's generic, it's not Belgian specific. So then I think I have said quite enough on the scope, so the activity and the size. I would like to move to slide 42, 43 on the obligations. So as said, we will briefly discuss in more detail how we see the four main obligations. So the first is an entity has to register, it has to take security measures, there is a responsibility for management board, and incidents that are significant, they need to be notified. One message that I also like to share is that also entities which are not in scope of NIS, even if they're not obliged to, it's a good household rule, basically the bon père de famille, who should basically do the same thing. He should also take measures, and he should also train himself and his personnel. So you can try to stay out of the legislation, but it shouldn't make that much difference. And it's a bit a strange message, but the only difference is that you won't be supervised, but if things go wrong, you can be out of business. That's what's at stake. So then let's go through each of the four obligations. The registration, where I, at slide 45, I briefly show, and that's specific Belgium, how that practically goes. So each entity that is in scope, and it is automatically in scope because of its activity and size, should go to our website to register as a NIS entity. And the platform that we use is the CCB platform, through which we offer other cybersecurity services, and we extended that with specific fields in order to be able to register as a NIS entity. So each entity needs to do this before March 18. It is online, so Belgian entities can already do this registration. And on slides 46 and 47, you see some screenshots of how it goes. We make use of the KBO, the Kruispuntbank Onderneming, Banque Carrefour des Entreprises, with enterprise data and the authorizations that are registered over there. So through your EID or It's Me, you can, the representatives, the legal representatives of those entities can register, and of course they can delegate to an employee to do that registration. So it can, in large organizations, it can take a while to identify the right person who is able and who can get the delegation. So my message would be, start to identify that person who has the rights to do so, because even if it's more than 5 months left, if you have to search through the organization who is able to do it, you better start with that. So that's how we do the registration in Belgium. We already have quite some NIS2 entities that went through that registration, and we expect it to really start as of October, when also we will have a media campaign on it to motivate the people to do the registration on time. Then on slide 48, 49, and the next, it's on security measures, which is of course the core of the NIS2 directive and law in Belgium. I think a lot has been already said during the previous presentation. I won't go into detail. Maybe just slide 51. It's another visual representation that you also can find on our website, but it's the same content as the presentation of Boriana, but just another visual way. The Belgian flavor we gave to it is that all those measures, so it is said it are 10 measures, but basically it's a whole set of things. It's more than just 10 lines. It's like 10 books or 10 specific domains that need to be covered. And in order to make that a bit feasible for entities who are confronted with all of that content, sometimes new, we made a Cyber Fundamentals Framework, which is a set of practical measures that you should consider. It's a gradual framework which has a basic, an important, and an essential level, and it goes with quite some tools, a self-assessment, a risk assessment tool, which also at the end of the presentation you will find where you can find them. So it's cyfon.eu as the domain that we reserved for it. But I would say it's a Belgian framework, but it's open for all other member states. There are discussions ongoing with other member states who would possibly like to join the framework and who would also defend it towards their entities or their country. Of course, we are a small country. We can't expect the larger ones to put the pride aside and join us immediately, but we try to promote it as a pragmatic tool that's open for use by others. Then slide 54, just one small word on supply chain obligation. So even if you are not in scope, but if in case you are a supplier to any NIS2 entity, I want to highlight that those entities who are really NIS2 entities you can expect them to come with requirements through contractual agreements, so that they request from you that you take at least some measures, and that might be done, and therefore that's why the Belgian flag is again on the slide. That can, for example, be done by means of a cyber fundamentals label or certificate or an ISO label that those NIS entities can request from their suppliers. So be prepared for that, even if you are not in scope. Then I would like to move to slide 56, 57, although maybe even immediately 58, even if that has already been discussed in detail. So here is the definition, and it's taken directly from the directive of what is a significant incident. So it's only significant incidents that need to be reported to the national authority with those deadlines 24, 72 hours. So as you see on the slide, it are incidents that cause or an unavailability or a serious financial damage or other damage. As mentioned, the discussions that are ongoing on that topic for the digital infrastructure, for the regulation on that topic, is setting, like informally, also some thresholds that inspire us, at least in Belgium, to make use of those same thresholds for the horizontal criteria. Even if it's not October 2nd, one of the financial thresholds that is currently being mentioned is like 500,000 as an order of magnitude of the damage, without any commitment that this will be the final one. It just gives an idea, 500,000 or 5% of the annual turnover as a minimal threshold, just to have a bit an idea. And I think that might also partly answer the question of William earlier. For the small entities, of course, it is a balance between a burden and the obligation, but it won't be each and any incident that needs to be notified. The idea is really to make a distinction and to filter out those really significant incidents for notification. Also from our side, and it's from a Belgian authority, each incident that is considered significant and that needs to be notified, on our side, CCB, we have the obligation to provide an answer within 24 hours. So in some way, we are also reluctant not to have each and every incident being notified, because we shouldn't do so for each phishing mail that has been received, but only for the real significant incidents. And this brings us at slide 60, the responsibility or the accountability of management bodies, with a brief description or a definition of what it's how it should be interpreted, management body. But as explained before, the management body is responsible for approving the cybersecurity measures and to oversee the implementation thereof, and also should attend training and should make sure that the personnel receives training and goes through awareness training. So, of course, the Commission made it a boardroom topic indeed, and that is because of the thing mentioned on top, the liability for infringements by the entity. So I think that's a bit an overview of those obligations and the Belgian flavor that we gave to at least some of them. I think in supervision, and that's slide 61, 62, there is some more Belgian flavor, in particular for how we approach the assessment of those entities and the measures that they take. For essential entities and only for them, we have the possibility to force them, if I can say like that, to appoint a conformity assessment body in order to demonstrate that the entity complies with the obligation through a certification. And there we offer the choice to do that via an ISO 27 or our proper framework certification, Cyber Fundamentals, as it is being developed. So I think on the next slide, that's an overview of how we approach for both important and essential entities the supervision, where there is a large role for conformity assessment bodies. So in human language, it's auditors coming along that we trust, and we approved the conformity assessment bodies in order that they are able to perform that role. And it's them going at the entity to check whether the self-assessment has well been filled out, whether the measures are taken, and based on the certificate, we take the certificate then further to judge whether compliance is in place, yes or not. I think we can go to the very last slides, where maybe mainly for documentation reasons, there are some URLs mentioned on slides 67, 8, and 9, where you can find additional tools, texts, materials in order to read it all, because it can take some hours to go into the details and have the nuances well understood. So we have the framework on cyfun.eu, and we have specific dedicated web pages, both on our corporate website CCB and on the Save on Web page, which is Save on Web is our brand to the public to communicate on cybersecurity. So with that, I would like to invite you, if you have any further question, you can ask it now or later on during the session. Thank you.
Oh, very, very interesting, and to see where it is, and also to see that there is a location where everybody can find a lot of information, also in English for the Belgians, for the other countries. So you don't have to understand French or Dutch. You find a lot of documents in English. I think also one of the important points is that you have in your network with the other member states, you have an expert group. You told me some months ago where a lot of exchanges are done. So I think to everybody, if you have discussions with your member state, with your authorities, you can go back to that expert group and ask a little bit more or about the fact that they're working together. So very, very interesting. So I open now the floor for questions. I received, in the meanwhile, a lot of questions for you, Bojana, but it's going to be for later. I have one question, Carl, for you. There are 156 items to complete for the important companies. Do all 156 measures need to be met by October 18?
Okay, that's an easy one, no. But in the legislation, there is a timing that has been set, and that's applicable to essential entities that make the choice to certify through the Cyber Fundamentals certificate, so those who don't choose ISO, for example. And there is a timeline of having the certificate obtained after 30 months. With an intermediate evaluation after 18 to have reached like the important level. So, of course, the legislation enters into force on October 18. It doesn't mean that as of October 18 you should have the certificate. Of course not. But the obligation is to have started or to start the taking of measures as of October 18. So yeah, it's up to each and every national authority to to demonstrate whether that exercise has indeed started. But if you can't demonstrate or show anything that is ongoing, it will be hard towards the authority to say, yes, we are really busy. Yeah, time to start as of October 18th.
I ask it to you, but I think it's going to be more Bojana. But as Belgium is the place where you have a lot of multinationals installed in Brussels, the question is, can multinational companies centralize NIS2 compliance management through their headquarters rather than registering all legal entities across the member states, especially give that our entities shared the same information systems?
I can have a first answer, but as said, for the jurisdiction, because that's what the question is about, is in each member state that multinational has an establishment, there will be a jurisdiction, and they are parallel. So it is even in the recitals clearly described that such an entity can't report to only one national authority. No, it is obliged to report to each and every national authority, and the same goes for the security measures. So despite the harmonization, if one member state gives another nuance to certain measures that need to be taken in that other country, that needs to be respected. So that's on the edge of the harmonization, I would say.
I will say that, in fact, if you are a multinational, you will have, or you can have one system, but you will have to put it in every country.
Yep.
William? Yeah, Bojana.
If I can add to this, so for the chemical industry, this would be the case because of the jurisdictional regime. NIS provides for other types of jurisdictional regime, for example, for cloud and so the digital infrastructure sector, where it is considered that such companies are by default multinational, or they provide services across the whole EU. So for them, a more simplified regime has been established to comply with basically to comply with the national transpositions of the member state where they have their main establishment in the EU. So if a company is a cloud or an online marketplace or a data center, they would have to have one main establishment and then comply and report to only one. This was a simplification because of the nature of their services and that they're generally cross-border, and there was a need for simplification. But then for all the more traditional sectors and industries, it is based on national establishments.
Thank you.
Two things. I really like your insider views on how you build that up for Belgium. I think I now understand why you're rated the best in class for the time being. But competition is raging out there. I'm pretty sure that other countries would follow track on what Belgium has accomplished. Supply chains, you mentioned that in your presentation. I think the news are full of warfare actions that actually embrace supply chains weaknesses. In warfare, as in ransoms, where we are no exception within the chemical industry. We heavily depend on supply chains, on contractors, right, that themselves are or could be connected to networks of own properties. So I would certainly highlight that in from your presentation into our membership, that we are not only have to comply to the NIS2 under the NX2 classification, yes, but we also have to have systems in place to assess the supply chain compliance. And in this regard, that actually leads to another point in your presentation, capture the reference to ISO 27001, and more broadly to a Belgium system. I love it. I love this acronym, CyFun. I wish it could be so fun, but no, that doesn't fit. So CyFun for Cyber Fundamentals. My question is there a way to have a sort of standardized system to get to self-assessment for companies, larger or smaller, in particular smaller ones, to help them assess or pre-assess their level of compliance or weaknesses, gaps, actually, make gaps analysis indeed, to get to that level of compliance?
Maybe for the last topic on cyber fundamentals, indeed, there is, besides the booklets that are published on the website in 4 languages, so not only our 3 national languages, but also English. Beside that, there is a self-assessment tool, which evaluates both the documentation and the implementation, and provides, and it's almost, it's hard to read, but on slide 69 you see the spider diagram that comes out of it. So it, just to give an idea what it brings, and that allows indeed to start gap analysis and things like that, and to prioritize the actions to be taken. As soon as entities start to do that exercise, they become aware of what we're really talking about, because there it's getting more practical on several actions that can be taken, should be taken. That's the purpose of it. And in particular, indeed, for those smaller entities that can start with that, with the documentation online, and sometimes with some support, of course, of external parties. But as a rule, you can open the tool and start filling out.
Good, thank you. I think it was very, very interesting, and I think there will still questions coming up. So we keep contact, but that's not a problem. So we heard about the directive. We heard about how one member state has transposed it in national law. And now it's, I think, time to listen to the industry associations who help member states and their industry in the transposition and the implementation of the directive. So we are at the positive points. What are the positive points? What are the difficulties they must deal with, and how they solve them in a constructive and positive way? So my first 2 speakers are Claudia Klebs, Advocacy and Legalization Division Director of the Polish Chamber of Chemical Industry, and Alexandra Sutrik, Chief Specialist Advocacy and Legislation Division of the Polish Chamber of Chemical Industry. So they will give together a presentation about how it's done in Poland. A question to Claudia and Alexandra: do you want to do the presentation by yourself, or do you want us to pass the film you have prepared?
Hello everyone, good morning. Due to that we are now in a delegation, I think that technically it will be more useful and proper to play our presentation, because we have to leave the meeting like in half an hour, I guess. So due to delegation, our trip back to Warsaw. So
okay, thank you, Claudia.
Thank
we will
you.
do it like that. Miriam, up to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Claudia Klebs, and I'm a Director of Advocacy and Legislation Division in the Polish Chamber of Chemical Industry. First of all, thank you for this opportunity to share our views as a Polish Chamber of Chemical Industry on the implementation of the Network and Information Security Directive. The second voice today giving details on the directive is Aleksandra Sutryk. She's specialist in advocacy and legislation team.
Thank you, Claudia. Good morning, everyone.
Firstly, let me briefly introduce our organization. We are an organization representing the chemical industry before public administration bodies, both domestic and foreign, as well as international organizations. It's more than 35 years we are supporting the Polish chemical industry. We take an active part of hundreds of national and EU legislative processes and in shaping regulatory solutions. Our activity includes reducing the effects of regulatory burdens and developing solutions for the chemical sectors, strengthening the competitive position of the Polish chemical industry, sustainably related activities, or efforts to decarbonize the chemical industry, reducing financial and administrative burdens. Our activities also cover, of course, the improving the security of the chemical sector, part of which is cybersecurity. We support activities for the development of the industry. We organize conferences, seminars, meetings devoted to the most important aspects of the daily activities of the domestic chemical sector, as well as the challenges facing the entire industry. With more than 150 members, among others are the largest manufacturers of the chemicals, refining and petrochemical companies, transport and distribution companies, technology companies, scientific and research institutes, or consulting and law companies. Next slide, please. I'd now like to move on to share a short review of the cybersecurity landscape in Poland. In 2019, cybersecurity strategy of the Poland for 2019-2024 has been officially approved. This document defines strategic goals and relevant policies and regulatory measures that need to be implemented to make information systems, key service operators, critical infrastructure operators, digital service providers, and public administration resilient to cyber threats. The proposed solutions are related to increasing the level of the national security as well. The strategy takes into account, in particular, cybersecurity objectives and priorities, entities involved in the implementation and deployment of the strategy, measures used to achieve the objectives of the strategy, a specification of means for response and restoration, including principles of public-private cooperation, risk assessment approach, activities related to educational, information and training programs regarding cybersecurity, or activities related to research and development plans regarding cybersecurity. As you can see, document defines 5 specific objectives, which, for example, are development of the national cybersecurity system, increasing the national capacity in the area of cybersecurity technology, building public awareness and competences in the area of cybersecurity. Next slide, please. The emergence of the new cyber threats are forcing public institutions as well as private entities responsible for cybersecurity to devote more and more resources to ensuring cybersecurity. The changing international situation makes it necessary to further strengthen the actors of the national cybersecurity system. This situation is highlighted by the statistics of the Computer Security Incident Response in NIS. In 2022, for example, more than 39,000 cybersecurity incidents were reported, and in 2023, we have more than 75,000 cybersecurity incidents. The NIS2 Directive and the regulations implementing it are some kind of response to the dynamically changing situation in cyberspace. Next slide, please. The adoption of the Act of National Cybersecurity System in 2018 created the legal and the organizational basis for building, for the first time in the history, a comprehensive cybersecurity system in Poland. This system is continuously developed. Also, strategy is currently being updated. In Poland, the provisions of the NIS Directive are implemented by the Act of the National Cybersecurity System, so-called ANCS, of 28 August 2018. Complete implementation of the NIS Directive required the adoption of two Council of Ministers regulations. In addition to implementing the directive, the purpose of the ANCS was to create an effective information and communication security system at national level. Next slide, please. As you can see on the map, it presents the most important relations between entities of the national cybersecurity system, and their duties. These are really complex. The NIS2 Directive replaced the previous division into key service operators and digital service providers into essential entities and important entities. In addition, the catalog of sectors covered by the directive has been expanded. The NIS2 Directive also imposes a number of obligations on essential entities and important entities, but detailed information on this and where we are in this process will be provided by Alexandra Sutryk. Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudia, for making the introduction of the theme of our presentation. And now I will ask for the next slide. And we are coming already to the main topic of the presentation, which is the implementation of the NIS2 Directive. So to implement the NIS2 Directive into the Polish law, it requires an update of the Act on the National Cybersecurity System. But at the same time, Polish legislators want to implement the 5G toolbox as part of the update of the Act, and also the goals of the entire update of ANCS is expected to bring closer the implementation of some of the goals of the cybersecurity strategy of the Republic of Poland, which Claudia talked about earlier, and the goals under the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. Next slide, please. And what is the implementation timeframe? So the public consultation of the draft and the launch of the public consultation took place on the 24th of April, and the consultation lasted until 25th of May. The estimated time for the act to be adopted is 17th of October 2024, which is also the deadline set by the European Commission. And after a 6-month period for the adaptation to the requirement of the ANCS, there's the estimated time for the complete implementation, and it's the second quarter of the 2025. Next slide, please. The new ANCS covers the entities which are identified in the NIS2 Directive, classifying them as essential and important. The only significant change, especially for our industry, is that the chemical industry in Polish project has been moved to the essential entities. And to this change, the legislator is, of course, entitled. Next slide, please. And to indicate how much change the new version of the Act introduces, we need to look at the figures, because now 9 sectors was regulated by ANCS, and after the changes, the new ANCS will regulate 18 sectors. So earlier 400 entities was under the ANCS, and new ANCS will take 28,000 entities, of which 214 are chemical industry entities. Next slide, please. And what are the key responsibilities under the new ANCS? One of the most important obligations, which will require a huge organizational effort to implement many changes to the organization, including new internal processes and procedures, will be the requirement to have an information security management system for processes affecting service delivery. The ANCS does not define what this system is, but the Polish standard indicating that it is a set of policies, procedures, guidelines, and assigned resources and activities collectively managed by an organization to protect its information assets might help in this regard. The system should include, in particular, the systematic assessment of incident risk and risk management. These assessments should take into account the degree of dependence of the essential or important entity, the network information system, should also allow for a systematic analysis taking into account the human factor. And also these risks should be analyzed holistically, which means that both the internal and external risks should be taken into account, like technical, physical, and environmental risks. The system should also include appropriate technical and organizational measures, collection of information of cyber threats and vulnerabilities. The information collection process is intended to allow for the exchange of information between entities covered by the Act, by the ANCS, and to respond to requests from cybersecurity authorities. Also, the system should include incident management, application of measures to prevent and mitigate the impact of the incidents, and also use of electronic communication measures within the national cybersecurity system. Next slide, please. And to tell you what, according to the draft, is meant by appropriate and proportionate measures to be assessed risks. So here are the examples of this, and it's among others, maintenance and safe operation of the information system. It's physical and environment security, including access control, the coverage of the information system. And the next slide, please. It's also policies and procedures for evaluating the effectiveness of technical and organizational measures, and also policies and procedures for the use of cryptography. Next slide, please. The draft also allows the Council of Ministers to issue some sectoral guidelines for information security management system. In issuing these guidelines, they should be guided, among other things, by the recommendation of the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, but also the scale of the entity's activity. Also, in addition, the draft provides the possibility to impose individual administrative penalties directly on managers in the event of non-implementation or incorrect implementation of particular requirements of the ANCS in the company. For example, this may include members of the management board. The penalties may amount to up to 600% of the salary received by the penalized person. Next slide, please. The Act also regulates responsibilities for handling security incidents, including the time for reporting early warnings of major incidents, or the time for reporting major incidents. Next slide, please. According to the new ANCS, approximately 10% of the entities that are supervised under the ANCS are to be controlled annually. The estimated cost of the implementation of this regulation is 900 million Polish zlotys in the first 3 years. And in order to fulfill the duties indicated in the Act, the creation of additional 371 positions in supervisory bodies is planned. Next slide, please. So the process of public consultation, as I earlier said, lasted 1 month. Over 100 submitted positions was made. And this is a large number for a public consultation process. But looking at the number of entities that will be regulated, it is not surprising. Comments were provided by companies, by business organizations, by government institutions. The comments were diverse, starting with a minor drafting with clarifying new provisions, but major changes were also indicated, like in our position. Our main postulates was to align the classification of entities presented in the draft with the classification contained in the NIS2 Directive, which is important for our industry because we were the only one that was changed from the NIS2 Directive. But also our main postulate was to differentiate the responsibilities between essential and important entities, which in this draft is not recognized, and also to extend the vacatio legis to at least 12 months. So the first one comment was typical for our industry, but the other two postulates also appeared in other positions. So we therefore hope that they will be taken into account in the project. And what is important, that the text following the consultation has not been published yet. So we are still waiting if our comments will be included in the act. This is very important because, as you have seen on the timeline, we have less than a month until the planned deadline for the adoption of the draft and the deadline for the implementation of the NIS2 Directive into our national legislation. While we are waiting for the official text as PIPC, however, we are undertaking a number of activities to prepare our members, but about this, Claudia will tell you. Claudia,
thank you. Thank you, Alexandra, for this valuable insight on the implementation of the NIS2 Directive. Okay, so let's move to the next point. So how we supported so far our members for the implementation of the directive. Years ago, we developed a dedicated project on digitalization and automatization in the chemical industry, including cybersecurity issues, the Chemistry 4.0 project. It is our response to challenges, changes, and new directions of the development resulting from the implementation of the solutions of the fourth industrial revolution. This project is first in Poland, creating a platform connecting manufacturers, suppliers, and customers of products and services in chemical industry. For instance, as a part of this project, last year, we had a special workshop on challenges in implementing NIS2 Directive. Even yesterday, and at another event in the cycle, we hosted a workshop regarding cybersecurity in the chemical sector, new obligations and regulatory requirements. Next slide, please. We have already conducted many other activities. For example, we have addressed the topic of the NIS2 Directive at the Polish Chamber of Chemistry Congress, which is the most important annual meeting of the chemical industry in Poland and Central Europe. Or as a part of our works, of our special working group, Safety and Technology Community Meeting, we had already conducted many discussions and dedicated workshops. Next slide, please. So that brings me to the end of our presentation. Thank you for the attention. It was a pleasure to share our insights on the NIS2 Directive. If you have any questions or would like to contact with us, you can find here our contact details. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. So thanks to Claudia and Alexandra. They absolutely wanted to be part of the meeting and to present, but they had a time constraint. That's the reason why they sent us the video. Important thing is how they explain and what they explain about the role they see of the Chamber of Commerce or the country to help the industry. And I think that's a very important point. There were two other points I found that's the first time we speak about money. And I think it's an important point also. They were speaking about 900 million euros in the next 3 years. 900? Yeah, then I'm sorry, I was okay. But okay, it's a huge. I think Simon will also speak about money, and the fact that the period for the implementation that they think that it has to be extended, and so that's something. Discussions that will be taken within the different working groups on European level and within the member states. So if you have some questions for them, put them in the chat or put them in the question and answer, and we will ask them to answer so that everybody can receive the answers on the questions. So my last speaker of the day is Simon Gianodoli, just Simon, Manager Chemtech Digital Transformation and SMEs at Franchimie. So you explain us how the transposition is done in France and the impact on their industry. So Simon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jean, and thanks for having me. As well, thanks for all of the other speakers. I come with a lighter presentation. All the technical measures has been already edicted, I'd say. First, a word of introduction from Franchimie. Franchimie represents the French chemical industry in France. So we, as our colleagues from Poland, we have the same set of action. Under this scope, I'm in charge of digital transition and cybersecurity. We will go for the next slide, please. So going back to the scope of NIS2 in France, according to our estimations, a bit more or less 60% of our members would fall under NIS2. 50% of them are imported entities, so SMEs, so to speak. 5 up to 10% will be considered as essential entities from the French state in our estimation. Last year in 2023 at spring, our National Cybersecurity Agency, NC, proposed us a technical set of measures which ran under consultation of the French industry. So we participated actively to this consultation at the end of last year to give some insights. We'll go to the next slide to have a bit of context as well. The state of the art of our transposition. The transposition bill is at standstill due to national political context. As you know, the parliament was dissoluted by the president in June. So we are waiting for a new government in the upcoming days. And the bill was prepared. It has not come to vote to the parliament. We expect that the bill will be a bit delayed from 18th of October. Anyway, the final technical set of measures is awaited at the very beginning of 2025, at the end of January, normally, according to the national agency. Now we go for the next slide, please. What's our position? Firstly, as the final technical set of measures is not definitive, it's not final yet, I will not disclose the measures. I will give some example. I'm sorry, but this is not definitive for the time being, so I'm a bit limited on the technical measures here. But some insights we had. First, for us, NIS2 is, of course, an opportunity for the chemical industry. We need to achieve this objective following the NIS1 Directive. We need to strengthen our common level of cybersecurity within the EU. The cyber threat is evolving now. You have social engineering attacks, you have AI model attacks, you have convergent OT and IT attacks nowadays, and the industrial facilities are becoming prey for cyber attackers. risks are quite high and are becoming as important as physical attacks for our industry. So, of course, we welcome the NIS2 Directive. Being said, if we go to the next slide, our businesses' capacities, not just the one before, yeah, thank you. Our businesses' capacities are limited to implement NIS2 for some reason. The NIS2 Directive will lead to strong needs for qualified and experienced workforce in cybersecurity. In France and in Europe, we are lacking that force. Most of the new needs in staff for cybersecurity will be entry-level positions. So we will have young and new cybersecurity staff in companies, which is a good thing, of course, but we are lacking experienced staff. Secondly, and we discussed a bit about it in the other presentation, as it is in directive and we have 27 transposition at national level, we stress out the gold plating risk. We would need to have a proportionality level, good level playing field into the single market. We would not like to have stronger measures than our, I don't know, Italian colleagues, German colleagues, Austrian colleagues, and the reverse. So we would like to have a normalized set of measures at EU level, at least. It's also a case of competitiveness for all EU companies that falls under the scope. And what have been asked and proposed also by policymakers, it's to have an official transposition period of 3 years for all the companies subjected to NIS2. This is what we asked. We would like some proper timeline to implement all the measures. In the technical set of measures we've been proposed by ANSI, you have 20 main objectives to comply with subsequent measures that list, and we listed more than 152 sub-measures to comply with, which is quite a long list of measures to comply with, to be compliant with. And thirdly, if we can go to the next one, please. Transposing NIS2 must not become a regulatory headache for us. This slide does not mean to be offensive, of course. From the technical measures we have now and that are under discussion, we have the impression and we fear that this technical set of measures is more about compliance than operational cybersecurity. What I mean is that we are fearing that the teams that will implement NIS2 in our businesses will spend more time in the check the box logic than ensuring an efficient cybersecurity defense. Some of them are basic cyber hygiene measures, and we welcome them. Some others are a bit subject to interpretation, considering the directive. What we highlighted is that we would like to transpose NIS2, only NIS2, and nothing but NIS2. So Article 20 and 21 only. And from the discussions and collaborations we have with the national agency, this is under discussion, but this is a very major point for us to have a proper transposition that not overcome the directive itself. As well, NIS2 must not be an additional regulatory layer in French regulations. We have some chemical companies that will go under that will be essential entities according to the directive. Some of them are already subjected to other national regulations. They are considered as critical entities, a critical enterprise under French law, and they are already subjected to very stringent cybersecurity standards. So we would like to merge those regulations and that to have only one set of rules for those entities. So that we will have NIS2 at the top and a merge of all the regulations to avoid any unrelated measures and to ease our understanding and the implementation of these measures. Finally, if we take the set of measures for the time being, we estimated that the cost of compliance would be, for the time being, too high in relation to the objective. The objective is to have a common level of cybersecurity, and we welcome that objective. This is also our wish, but it has to be compliant with the costs. If we have maybe a step back, for the time being, at EU scale or even at French scale, the chemical sector is playing in a very competitive economic global scale. The past 2 years has not been the best for companies. We'll speak about the energy prices, inflation, the Ukrainian crisis, and so on, as well as a regulatory tsunami from EU regulation. I will speak maybe about the CSRD, the EU deforestation regulation that is coming as well. And the NIS2 is another one to implement for our companies, especially to SMEs, which is a good thing. And as I stated before, it is an opportunity, but the cost of compliance is getting quite high. If we sum all the regulations, it becomes quite a cake with so many layers. At French scale, this is also why we will need to have a proper transposition and to avoid any gold plating. We'll go to the final slide, I think. What have we done since 2023? At spring 2023, we established a national cybersecurity working group at France Chimie, gathering all the experts from our members. This led us to have some actions towards political and public authorities. That would be the Ministry of Economy, that would be the National Cybersecurity Agency, that would be the Prime Minister Cabinet, that would be with our friends here at Cefic, with Jean as well. And we had the opportunity to raise some members awareness already, with some working groups, webinars, and some information and communication to our members. We are waiting for the final technical set of measures, of course, to communicate a bit more with our members. We would like to have this definitive before we communicate, and to prepare our members to implement this new regulation. I think I'm done with this presentation. We'll be very glad to take some questions, and welcome and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Simon. Interesting presentation. In fact, we had a numbers of presentations, countries and countries where it seems to go without too many problems, and then now I think we need to have a presentation from a country to show also that it's not always easy to implement it. Yeah.
Just a final comment. When I spoke about the cost of transposition, I didn't mention the cost from our estimation. For the time being, it would be 0.5 billion euros for our industry to implement just NIS2.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the cost has to be mentioned and has to be. Yeah, it's the chemical industry. Because you are speaking about the chemical industry in France, we're going to have to pay it. I think also you spoke in the past about 200,000 euros for a small and medium company to implement it. So
for SME, the cost is estimated between 100k to up to 200k, and you can double that number if you have a larger company or an essential entity.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for Simon or for one of the other people here in the room? Yeah, William?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Of your presentation, also my takeaway regards the risk of overlapping regulations or directives at the European level and national level in the implementation phase. That actually triggers a question from my side that also stems from internal questions that we've got from the board or the executive committee of Cefic already some time ago, and back to the COVID time actually, when the debate around chemical industry becoming critical infrastructures or essential sector was also on the table for COVID reasons, and that was very much targeted. But this question was also on the table before COVID times. And the way we could see that implementation of the NIS2, although chemical industry is as a sector is considered as in the Annex 2 as important and not essential, though the criteria for compliance are very much the same, except the reporting, which is or the not the reporting, the which is done ex post versus ex ante. But for the rest, it's pretty much alike between the two annexes, right? So that's a point that I would like to bring to your attention as well, is to how to avoid a sort of by design overlap between the so-called Critical Infrastructures Directive and the NIS Directive, although the scope of work are different, but the outcome and the results of those compliance elements are pretty much the same, right? So how to avoid that a sector being not falling under the Critical Infrastructures Directive, which has a significant number of requirements in terms of reporting, assessment, check, and double checks, would actually be de facto considered as critical in terms of the NIS directive as far as the requirements for reporting are concerned. So how to manage that? And that's a question not certainly to you, actually, in the implementation phase to avoid that overlapping of the directives.
So, thank you. The Critical Entities Resilience Directive, which is the one you mean, yeah. It is complementary to the NIS directive. It deals with the physical resilience, whereas NIS deals with the cybersecurity resilience. And the cyber elements are excluded from the SER scope. So the idea is that the two work together. That's why we have the annexes, Annex 1 of the SER and Annex 1 of Annex 1 of NIS is almost the same as the SER scope. And for cases like in the digital infrastructure sector, where the physical resilience is part of the cybersecurity resilience, the obligations under SER are excluded. Basically, NIS applies to everything. And if there's the measures would be under NIS, and then the reporting would go under NIS, and so on. For the other sectors that are covered by under SER, but this is not the case of the chemicals. The chemical sector is only under NIS. So you have to only look at the NIS and comply with NIS and so on. Basically, the two are complementary. There should not be a full overlap. It could happen that in the critical entities that are identified under SER, they would also have to comply with NIS. Then there might be an overlap, but currently it should not be the case for the chemical sector.
Good. Are there other questions in the room or online? No hand raised. Fine, then again, we can go to the next slide. Say a word about the takeaways for us. I can take the next one. So waypoints based on what we heard during those 4 very interesting presentations, 3 takeaways for everybody. In fact, it's the first one, and I think everybody will certainly agree with those different ones. The first one is NIS2 enhanced protection for all our IT systems against external threats. So it's a must to have it, and it will help us to protect ourselves using the risk-based approach to protect ourselves about external threats based on cyber. So that's a very important thing. What we also heard, in fact, when we listened to the different presentation given by I will say the Federation and the Chamber of Commerce, is that we need a pragmatic and harmonized approach across the member states, and that will help achieve a minimum compliance level for the industry within an acceptable time frame. It's not only for the sites or the industry based in only one country. It's very complicated when you have multinationals having sites in different European countries, when you don't have an harmonized system in place, when you don't have an harmonized approach and questioning, in fact, because most of the multinationals will be organized from the headquarters and they will install their system in the different countries. So that's how pragmatic is also an important word, I think, but we already said that. And then the third bullet point is what do we know? And because everything is not solved. So we need to adopt innovative approaches to address the remaining challenges. And one of the remaining challenges I put here on the slides is people and training. I think in other forum about the NIS2 Directive, there was a discussion about the people needed to push NIS2 in place. I will not give a number of people because it's a huge amount of people, but it's clearly a subject and a very important subject, not only for the member states, but also for the industry, to have people and to have trained people to be able to implement the NIS2 Directive.
If you allow me. Supply chain. Yeah, I'm saying again, it wasn't connected, sorry for that. If you allow me to add fourth one actually on a particular attention needed to be on the supply chain, because those companies sometimes are large companies, so they have corporate functions, they have management systems in place, but some others and many working for SMEs are actually smaller entities, right? That might be somewhat less connected or even disconnected from the directive requirements, and also providing services to us. So I think we could easily have a fourth bullet, which might not be specific to the chemical industry, that the case for many industry sectors, but for us in particular, because our core business is to make molecules and to create bonds, chemical bonds, not to necessarily maintain facilities or even transport our products from A to B. But those services, although at the core of the chemical supply chains, are not necessarily managed by the chemical manufacturers per se. Let alone, I'm thinking of our colleague here in the room of Honeywell that provides a IT for process, IT solutions for process management and process safety and security at the same time, you know, so system softwares that themselves may have their own environment and weaknesses eventually, and exposure to threats, attacks, hacking. So we need to be also conscious of that rather complex supply chain that actually makes chemicals products a reality for the European society, and and be conscious that we are not only operators there, but we need to branch out to other service providers down the road. So maybe a fourth one, as far as my takeaway from this conversation here. And opening to the floor online. We have close to 100 people being connected and in the room, of course.
Yeah. So thank you. We will add the fourth one on the slide before we send out the presentation. So I think with that, we arrived at the end of the webinar. So we will provide you the slides summary report and the answer to the questions, the one we did not have the time to answer. And then a question to all of you, and I go to the next slide, is to improve our events is we like to have your feedback, and so you can just take a picture of the QR code, and then you can give your comments. It will help us to prepare the next webinar on this subject or on the subjects related to cybersecurity and process safety and others. So I want to thank everyone for the attendance of the Policy Horizon webinar on the NIS2 Directive. But in first place, I want to thank you, Bojana and Carl, and Simon and Claudia and Alexander, who already left, because without your presentations, we couldn't make it. And I think it was they were very interesting presentations that are very useful, and certainly when we give it to the people, I think everybody will be able to use the information. They will find it in a good way, in a constructive way to achieve what we need to achieve. I wish you all a very nice rest of the day. And as we are on Friday, I wish you all a nice, beautiful weekend. So thanks to all. Thanks to our speakers.
Thank you. Thank you very much.